digital, I would have probably done it first.
I had two names, and I had you two. Look at that. I believe it.
Hey, could you talk a little bit about, now that you've gone through the entire training camp, what would you say the offensive line has made more progress in protection or in the run blocking?
That's a good question because, again, still you don't have all these live periods, so it's always hard to really get an evaluation of where we're at with things. But we do feel very good about the progress we've made in both aspects, but particularly the run game, of just our targeting, our identification, of what we're trying to get accomplished, of getting essentially 11 guys on the exact same page with every single look we see. Now, in terms of moving a defender from point A to point B, that's the part that you're not 100% sure you've been able to see yet, other than when we get in these games. And we haven't played all 5 of our guys together at the same time yet, or our anticipated 5. Too many snaps at the same point yet. So that's something that we'll continue to see. Again, we have time moving into week 1 before we get ready for that, but we're confident in where we're headed with that.
One of the common threads with Bigsby in this camp seems to be that he's pretty consistent in terms of not going down on initial contact. Is that the guy that you envisioned when you drafted him?
Yeah, I think he's tough to tackle. I think that's the biggest part of it. And he just continues to grow and be more consistent in what we're looking for. I think Jerry Mack has done a great job coaching him on what the expectation is with each single scheme, what the looks are. Phil and Rich and those guys, Greg Austin, those guys are doing a great job just trying to simulate as many looks as we could possibly see, give those to all, not just the line, but the backs as well. It's very important that they get a chance to see what these combinations look like in their zone schemes, what these down blocks, what the puller looks like in certain looks. And that's the value of the joint practice too. Now we all of a sudden saw a lot more 5-down fronts and some different looks from Tampa that we were able to kind of test our schemes against.
Hey, Chris, Evan Ingram is always the first on the field. It seems like he's always working extra. I mean, just from your perspective, what have you seen from him in terms of his work ethic and just what he's been able to do with those little extra moments?
Yeah, he's just, he's kind of the ideal professional. Just the time he puts into his craft, from his, physical maintenance to just getting his body ready to go for practice. And then I don't even know if you guys see it, he's the last one off the field as well most times. And now it's cool to watch. You look outside and Brenton Strange is right there next to him. So Evan's still the first on the field, he's the last off the field, and he's bringing people along. And I think part of it, we try to tell our young guys, watch the right guy in your room. There's somebody in every single room that we think those guys can model their game after, or just their approach to work after. And so it's cool to see the young guys. Parker was kind of Christian's shadow all last year. Brenton's become Evan's shadow as it moved forward. The Anton and those guys following Brandon and Cam, and it's just cool to see the young guys follow the older guys that have done it for a long time, have had success in this league. Because there's no secret to success in terms of just the work ethic that it takes to be a consistent pro, and we have guys that can model that well.
Russ, obviously, you guys are familiar with EJ. He's familiar with how you guys operate, so I think it kind of made sense to bring him in. For him in particular, kind of what steps did you guys go through, or what went into the evaluation process of saying we need to add another quarterback?
Part of that was just CJ's health, just moving forward to make sure as we go into this next game, just not limiting our ability to play this game out as we go. And so EJ's a guy we obviously have trust in, and he's been around us. He's a guy that we can bring in the very last minute, and he is going to know 50 to 75% of the terminology from the jump. Guys are familiar with him, which I think that's a part of it as well. Not everybody's played with him, but a lot of guys have been here just through his time on and off the roster. So a guy that we have confidence in as a coaching staff can help us through a game situation here.
Chris, you mentioned the starting 5 offensive line that reps together. How big will that be this weekend, just for them to finally get in a game and play next to each other?
Yeah, I think that's a big thing of just breaking the huddle, aligning in the huddle next to each other, breaking the huddle, communicating next to each other, and then there's still the timing of game reps, of how fast things happen. And I would still say preseason is not quite the step that regular season is going to be, but it's just one more step in the progress that we want to take to get ready for week 1.
Colvin Landon been one of those guys that had like a quietly good camp that we probably wouldn't notice?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. He's done a great job really since the spring of kind of just buying into everything we're trying to coach in the run game and protection world as well. He's really flashed in the run game for us on the backside of a lot of concepts, and we've kind of noticed that from way back when. So it's cool to see him play well, you know, in these preseason games as well.
Getting the new IR rule, we can put 2 guys on. You don't have to lose them for the season before roster. Does that impact how much does that impact decisions you guys might make? You know, in some spots, particularly like running back with Robinson.
Yeah, it's certainly a tool that, you know, you kind of use as a roster building tool. So now it changes a little bit of the formatting of how you're maneuvering guys on cut day, because, you know, there's always different ways people do things to try to keep guys. There's kind of the first wave of cuts, the last wave of cuts, to try to different ways that people will massage the roster building aspect of it. So I think that's a tool that can be utilized, that it'll be interesting to see how we use it necessarily.
Now that you've seen Brian Thomas Jr. in a couple preseason games and obviously all of camp, where's the progress at there with him?
I think it's similar to what we're talking about. It's just you keep seeing these steps that you want to see. And again, I don't think he's where he's going to be when we kick off whatever day our first game is, September something. I don't think he's there yet. And so, but he's a lot further ahead than he was when we came together at the start of training camp. So, and then for that to carry over, for him to make a play in that first preseason game, you just saw his confidence rise. For him to perform well in joint practices against Tampa, you just see this progression, and you see a little bit more of him becoming who we knew he would be. And again, I think he's a long way from where he's gonna be in 2 weeks, to let alone 18 weeks from now. So that it's just been cool to see him build the confidence in himself, build the confidence in the work he's put in, and I think, you know, he's just going to continue to grow from here.
The route that he had on Saturday, it's kind of been highlighted a little bit this week. How impressive of a play was that from
The catch he had on the sideline?
comeback.
I mean, that's kind of what you see, is a guy that when he's going to get free access, has a little bit of route technique to him that does a good job, and then being friendly at the top of the route, breaking to the sideline, catching the ball on the sideline. I thought that was a good catch going out of bounds. But that's something, you know, always using the threat of speed. That's something you want all these receivers to do. But we've talked about guys get defended based on their reputation. Well, people are going to know he's a 4-2 guy. And so he's going to get that respect in some aspect. So it's how does he utilize it every single route? It could be a 6-yard route. Can we get him to sell speed from the jump? And then it could be some of those routes where it's a stutter comeback that gets him up to 18 yards. I mean, something like that. So it's just kind of him owning each route and what it looks like. It's going to look different on one side than it does on the other based on who's running the route.
Is what the offense does dictate how long they'll play, or is it just going to be the full first half of those guys, the first team offense?
Yeah, coach will always kind of give them, expect to play this amount of time. And then I think that's always just leaves it to be determined. If he wants them to play longer, they're ready to play longer. We just tell the guys, be ready to play. And so for however long that is, sometimes you get into a game like the other night, and we had an 11-play drive, I think, the first time, and, you know, coach will go on the headset, hey, I've seen enough from so-and-so, he's out. Or let's get some of so-and-so a little bit more and keep going. So we kind of give them a general idea, but they know it could be shorter, longer, whatever it is. And I think a lot of these guys, once you tell them they're going to play, they get themselves ready to play. They don't, I think, concern themselves with, oh, I only need to be ready to play 10 plays, 20 plays, whatever that is. I think they'd be willing. There's a lot of guys that will pull them out, and they're like, I was just getting ready to go. Like, I'm fired up. Let's keep going. Because I think it takes a certain mindset and a certain physical preparation to get yourself ready to play a game, whether it's 10 plays or you don't know if it's 75 plays. And so these guys are always pretty geared up to play.
What did you take away from Elijah and Tim on Saturday?
I thought both those guys have done a great job, and a lot of those guys kind of competing on that back end for this down the line receiver spot. And again, there's an aspect of it that is offense. There's a major aspect of it that is special teams as well. So there's a lot that goes into the evaluation. We will give our opinion based on where we anticipate using these guys in the offensive role, and then Heath, Luke, those guys will provide their input for the special teams role. And so sometimes it can change week to week based on who's available throughout the course. You know, if you're missing one of your top 3, maybe there's more value in an offensive role for that player versus if you have everybody available to you, or it's a game where you anticipate more 12 personnel, 13 personnel, then maybe there's not much of an offensive role expected for that player, and now somebody else gets it. So those guys have done a great job just being consistent and understanding what the role is with each given play. There's sometimes where you're a primary on 3rd and 10. There's sometimes where you're a point block on 1st and 10, toss crack to you, or you have to dig out a safety on the backside of a run. So there's all these certain looks that I think those two guys really understand and embrace what they're being asked to do, and that's a valuable role for us as well.
When you look at who's been added and who's been subtracted from your skill position players and the offensive line, do you feel like Trevor has his best surrounding cast since he's been here? And taking into account that you would expect progress to be made.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. I mean, I don't know if I'd get into comparing year 1 to year 2 to year 3 personnel-wise, but I mean, when you look at the guys that are continue to be around, like Christian is so much better than he was 2 years ago when we started the system, to Evan, to I think just the knowledge of, or Trevor's relationship or knowledge of those guys that are playing and how they play and what they bring and what he likes to throw to them or how they like to see certain things. I would think that there's progress in that aspect. In terms of player to player, I don't know if I'd get into that comparison at all to begin with.
More? All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Preston.